If trouble ever took the shape of two human beings, it would look exactly like Rosemary and Winifred. People in Port Harcourt called them the River State Wreckers because any place they entered, something must scatter. But their favorite place to scatter was weddings. Not their own weddings, of course. Other people's weddings. The ones they were not invited to. The ones they had no business attending. Yet, they went every Saturday with the same confidence as bridesmaids. It all began on a hot Saturday afternoon in GRA Phase 2. Rosemary was lying on the sofa, scrolling through Instagram as if it was her job. She stopped when she saw a video of a bride crying tears of joy as she walked down the aisle. The bride's makeup was melting beautifully, and her groom was wiping her tears gently. People in the comments were typing things like, "God when," "Love is sweet oh," and "My marriage must be like this." But instead of smiling, Rosemary hissed so loudly that Winifred jumped. "What is that one again?" Winifred asked with her mouth full of chin-chin. "Look at this woman embarrassing herself because of man." Rosemary rolled her eyes, crying as if she won an award. "Winnie, you and I know that this same man would cheat on her next year, if not next month." Winifred burst into laughter and shook her head. Every Saturday is my king this, my world that. If only they know what relationships truly look like inside, they will cry blood instead of dancing. That was the moment something snapped between the two sisters. One tiny joke became a mad idea. The idea grew wings, and by the next Saturday, the River State Wreckers were born. Their first mission targeted a quiet wedding at St. Dominic Catholic Church in D-Line. They arrived in matching purple dresses and sat at the back like undercover agents. When the priest asked if anyone had an objection, Winifred jumped up dramatically. "Father, please stop this wedding." The entire church turned. Even the choir master dropped his microphone. Rosemary followed the script perfectly. She rushed forward like a rejected Nollywood lover. "Nathan, after everything we shared, after all the promises you made to me." The groom, a gentle-looking man named Nathan, almost fainted. The bride's face turned pale like garri soaked without water. Half the congregation took out their phones to record the drama. The other half whispered excitedly. Nathan stammered, "I don't know these women. I swear, I have never seen them in my life." But Rosemary fell to the floor crying. "Ask him, Father. He told me I was the only sugar in his tea. Now he wants to take another sugar. Is he opening a tea shop?" Gasps filled the church. Before anyone could grab them, the sisters ran out, jumped on a keke, and disappeared like smoke. 2 hours later, they were trending online as the wedding witches of Port Harcourt. That day, they returned home laughing so hard that their stomachs hurt. They clinked their bottles of Fanta together. "To drama," Winifred shouted. "To heartbreak we did not cause," Rosemary replied, proudly. Every weekend after that, they woke up early, dressed like queens, scanned Instagram for wedding locations, and selected the biggest event to destroy. They went with fake evidence, lies, crocodile tears, and a sprinkle of wicked confidence. They ruined the wedding in Woji, scattered another in Rumola, and left chaos behind at one in Elekia. They gained followers, they gained attention, they gained madness. Soon, their elder sister Linda called them. "Are you too mad?" she yelled. "Your faces are everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, even the WhatsApp group in my office. They are calling you Port Harcourt witches." Rosemary laughed. "At least we are trending, Linda. Do you know how many people wish to trend like us?" Winifred nodded proudly. "When Big Brother invites us, you will tune your mouth." But Linda wasn't laughing. "One day you will crash the wrong wedding and you will cry," she warned them. But they ignored her as usual. Weeks passed and they kept getting bolder. Then one day, Rosemary found something that made her scream, "Winnie, come and see this wedding. This one is big." It was a pre-wedding photo shoot of a model named Ruth and her groom, Luke, the son of a wealthy oil businessman. The wedding was set to take place at the presidential hall of one of the biggest hotels in Port Harcourt. Winifred's eyes shone like gold. "Perfect. Let's show them Pepe." They prepared like professional actresses. They rehearsed lines, faked tears, printed fake screenshots, and even bought a baby doll wrapped in a shawl for extra effect. On the wedding day, they arrived looking like two angels, matching blue gowns, flawless makeup, expensive perfume. They sat close to the front pretending to be invited guests. Everything was peaceful until the pastor asked Luke, "Do you take Ruth to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Winifred stood up at once. Her voice echoed across the hall. "Pastor, please hold on. This man is a liar." Phones flew out of pockets. Cameras turned. People gasped. Rosemary burst into loud wailing. "Tell them, Luke. Tell them how you impregnated my sister and abandoned me in Abba." Luke's jaw dropped. The bride's face turned pale like garri soaked without water. Half the congregation exploded with noise. But before the sisters could escape like usual, something unexpected happened. A calm but thunderous voice echoed from behind. "Enough!" Everyone turned. A tall man in a navy blue suit walked forward, dragging all attention with him. His eyes were sharp and full of fire. "My name is Mr. Pascal, and that woman there, the bride, is my wife." The hall froze. Rosemary and Winifred looked at each other with confused eyes. "Wait, what?" Whispers filled the room. "The bride is married? Jesus!" Mr. Pascal raised a brown envelope. He pulled out a marriage certificate and held it up for all to see. "This woman is legally married to me as Mrs. Ruth Pascal. She abandoned me 2 years ago and disappeared. I thought she was dead, only for me to see her pre-wedding photos yesterday." The crowd shouted. The groom looked staggered backward. Ruth fell to her knees crying. Winifred whispered, "Rose, we didn't plan this part." Rosemary replied, "For the first time in our lives, the wedding scattered itself." Before the crowd could react, the two sisters tiptoed away, ran out through a side door and escaped into a taxi. They laughed breathlessly the whole ride home. "Did you see Ruth's face?" Winifred screamed. Rosemary held her stomach. "For once, we didn't lie. The bride did the crashing by herself." But deep inside, they felt uneasy. Something about this wedding felt different. By evening, bloggers had posted the whole drama. The sisters were trendy again, accused again, insulted again, praised again. But something else was brewing. 2 weeks later, they heard about another big wedding happening at a luxury hotel in Port Harcourt. Everyone who was anyone would be there. "Let's end the year with a bang," Rosemary said. Winifred grinned, a big one. They arrived in red dresses and waited for the perfect moment. Then Winifred stood up in the middle of the dancing crowd and shouted, "Stop this wedding!" Chaos erupted again. They ran out laughing. But this time, their faces were captured clearly by high-quality cameras. And the groom's father was not an ordinary man. He was Chief Adigwe, a man with power, influence, and connections in every corner of Port Harcourt. By nightfall, he released a statement. A reward of 5 million naira for anyone who can identify these wedding destroyers. Within hours, their pictures, names, and address went everywhere. The neighbors gathered. Police arrived. The sisters were dragged out in handcuffs as people shouted insults. At the station, the DPO looked at them with cold eyes. "Do you know the bride you scared today collapsed? She has a heart condition. She is in coma." The words hit them like thunder. The DPO added, "If she dies, you will face manslaughter charges." Rosemary collapsed the floor. Winifred started crying. Chief Adigwe arrived with his lawyers and guards. His anger filled the whole room. "You will learn today that actions have consequences." For the first time in their lives, the River State records felt fear. Real fear. Fear that sat inside their bones. Fear that whispered that this time they had truly crashed the wrong wedding. The holding cell smelled of fear, sweat, and something that reminded Rosemary of old food left in the sun. Winifred sat hugging her knees, rocking back and forth while Rosemary paced like a restless lion. Outside, the murmur of police officers and the distant honking of Port Harcourt traffic made the hours feel endless. "I can't believe this is happening," Winifred whispered, her voice cracking. "Just one small wedding, Rosie, one, and now we are here." Rosie stopped pacing and stared at her sister. "Small wedding? We've been crashing weddings for months. This one just caught us." She dropped into the bench beside Winifred, rubbing her face. "I never thought we'd actually get caught." Winifred shook her head. "I told you Linda was right. You don't listen to her. We should have been careful." Rosie laughed weakly. A dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Careful? We are River State wreckers, Winnie. We don't do careful. But this is different." Hours passed slowly, with nothing but occasional footsteps echoing through the station. Then the DPO returned holding a sheet of paper. He looked at them silently before dropping it on the bench in front of them. "The bride woke up." Rosemary's jaw dropped. "Wake up? You mean she's alive?" Winifred jumped to her feet. "Thank God! Thank God! I swear, if anything happens to her, I will never forgive myself." The DPO did not move. "Chief Adigwe," he said, "refuses to drop the charges. You two will face the full law. Defamation, public disturbance, emotional trauma, everything." Rosie groaned, leaning back. "Great! We survived death, but not the law." The two sisters sat in silence as the weight of their actions began to sink in. The DPO left, leaving them with the ticking of the wall clock as the only sound. By evening, their sister, Linda, arrived. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She did not speak at first. She just stared at them, her disappointment heavy enough to crush a person. "I told you," she finally said, her voice shaking. "I told you all this would happen. You think life is like your Instagram drama. People get hurt, real people, and now you see where your fun has landed you." Rosie tried to explain. "We didn't mean it, Linda. It's just, we didn't know it would go this far." Linda shook her head. "You never mean it until it goes wrong. Now look at yourself. You two are in a police cell because of your foolishness." The sisters lowered their heads. There was no defense. Meanwhile, outside, Chief Adigwe had mobilized. Lawyers, security, and private investigators began searching for anyone who could help them identify them further. His influence in Port Harcourt meant that soon the sisters' lives would not be private again. Every blog, every news outlet, every social media page carried the headline, "Wedding Witches of Port Harcourt, Faces Revealed." The sisters' phones buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, and notifications came from friends, family, and strangers. Most were angry. Some were amused, but a few carried threats that made Winifred shiver. Rosie picked up one message from a number she didn't know. It read, "If you think you are untouchable, wait until I find you. I know where you live." Winifred grabbed her arm. "Delete that, Rosie. Delete it now." Too late, the seed of fear had been planted. That night, they were not allowed to go home. They slept in the cold holding cell, shivering under a thin blanket, thinking about the bride, Ruth, and how close she had been to death. They thought about Luke, the groom, and the humiliation he faced. And they thought about Chief Adigwe, whose anger was legendary. The next morning, the sisters were taken to court. The hall was packed. Reporters, cameras, curious citizens, even some of the people whose weddings they had crashed in the past were there. The judge looked over his glasses at them and sighed. "You two have been brought here for defamation, public disturbance, and emotional harassment. The court has evidence that you were part of events that nearly led to the death of a bride. How do you plead?" Rosie swallowed. "Guilty? Not guilty. We didn't mean," Winifred whispered. The judge raised his hand. "Enough! You will have the opportunity to explain, but the law does not take lightly the endangerment of human life." Chief Adigwe stood, his presence filling the courtroom. He did not speak immediately. He just stared at them. Rosemary and Winifred felt the full weight of his eyes. It was like being crushed under an invisible hand. "Your actions are reckless," he finally said, his voice deep and calm. "You did not just disrupt a wedding. You almost killed a woman. You humiliated my son. You insulted families. Do you understand the seriousness of this?" The sisters nodded, unable to speak. He continued, "I am offering you a chance to make this right. You will not walk free without consequences. But if you cooperate, apologize publicly, and commit to changing your ways, the court may show leniency." Rosie glanced at Winifred. "Did you hear that? It's our only chance." Winifred whispered, "But Chief, it looks like he could crush us if he wanted." The next few days, the sisters were guided by lawyers to prepare a public apology. They filmed videos, visited community centers, and spoke to church gatherings about the dangers of reckless behavior and spreading chaos. Every word felt heavy, but slowly the fear in their hearts began to ease. Despite their efforts, the shadow of their past actions followed them. Their friends were hesitant to meet them, neighbors whispered as they passed. Even their own family looked at them differently. The title, "Wedding Witches of Port Harcourt," was no longer a badge of pride. It was a mark of shame. Then came the day of the final hearing. The courtroom was packed. Judge Arombi looked at them over the rim of his glasses. "The court acknowledges your apologies and public service efforts," he said. "While your actions endangered lives, your cooperation shows understanding and willingness to change. The court sentences you to community service and a fine, but refrains from imprisonment." The sisters could not believe it. They were free. Chief Adigwe stood. "I hope you have learnt your lesson. I expect no further trouble from you, and if I hear of any more weddings ruined, you will face the full consequences of the law." Rosemary and Winifred bowed their heads. "Yes, sir." When they walked out of the courtroom, the sun was shining bright over Port Harcourt. They felt the weight of their mistakes, but also a strange sense of relief. They had been reckless, they had been foolish, and they had been close to disaster, but they had survived. As they sat in a cab on the way home, Winifred sighed. "Do you think we will ever be able to enjoy weddings again without thinking of chaos?" Rosemary looked out the window. "Maybe, but maybe we've learned something. People's lives aren't games. There are consequences." Winifred nodded slowly. "For the first time, we see that." The sisters didn't speak much for the rest of the ride. They were exhausted, humbled, and aware of how close they had come to losing everything. Yet, deep inside, something stirred, a quiet, cautious excitement. Maybe one day they could use their cleverness for good. Maybe they could still make a difference, but without hurting anyone. And for the first time, the River State Wreckers felt the possibility of change. The city of Port Harcourt went on with its life. Weddings continued, brides cried tears of joy. And somewhere, Rosemary and Winifred began plotting not chaos this time, but perhaps a way to help people avoid heartbreak instead of causing it. For the sisters, the journey from chaos to responsibility had just begun. After the courtroom drama, Rosemary and Winifred returned home quietly. The neighborhood that had once cheered them on as the River State Wreckers now watched them in suspicious silence. Even their own mother, Mrs. Linda, barely spoke. She just shook her head and muttered, "God, help them." The sisters sat in their apartment in GRA Phase 2, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on them. For the first time, the thrill of crashing weddings had disappeared. In its place was a strange emptiness and fear. Rosemary stared at her reflection in the mirror, her makeup still fresh from the courtroom day. Winifred sat on the floor, hugging her knees, silent. "Do you think we really learned something?" Winifred finally whispered. Rosie didn't answer immediately. She traced the scar of fear that had stayed with her since seeing Ruth's face in the hospital. "Maybe," she said finally. "Maybe we can still do good with our cleverness." But Port Harcourt had not forgotten the chaos the sisters had caused. Their names were still trending online, now mixed with judgment, advice, and warnings. And while most people had moved on, Chief Adigwe's influence ensured that the sisters remained under watch. One wrong step, and they would be back in handcuffs. Days passed slowly. Rosemary and Winifred volunteered at community centers, teaching young girls about the dangers of reckless behavior. They visited hospitals, bringing small gifts to brides and grooms recovering from stress or emotional trauma. Every act of kindness felt heavy, yet necessary. One afternoon, while the sisters were delivering a care package to a wedding planner in town, a familiar voice called out. Rosemary turned to see Mr. Pascal, the calm, powerful man who had revealed Ruth's secret marriage. He was dressed simply, yet carried an air of authority that made the sisters pause. "I hear you've been doing some good things," he said carefully. "I hope you've learned from your mistakes." Rosemary bowed slightly. "Yes, sir. We understand now." He studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe people can change. Just don't forget that one wrong action can ruin a life." Winifred nodded quickly. "We won't forget, sir." Weeks turned into months. The sisters continued their efforts quietly. They stopped crashing weddings, and though the temptation sometimes tugged at them, the memory of Ruth, Luke, and Chief Adigwe's courtroom anger stayed strong. They had tasted the consequences of unchecked chaos, and the memory burned in their minds like fire. But life had its surprises. One Saturday, while delivering flowers to a small wedding in D-Line, they overheard a conversation that made their hearts skip. The bride, young and nervous, whispered to her friend, "I heard about the River State wreckers. They ruined so many weddings, but the last ones, I think they changed. I heard they now help brides avoid heartbreak." Rosie smiled faintly. She looked at Winifred. "Could we really be known for something good?" she asked quietly. Winifred nodded. "Maybe. Slowly, we can rewrite our story." Yet, as they walked out into the warm afternoon sun, neither sister could shake the feeling that the city still watched them, that somewhere a new wedding might test their resolve, that their cleverness, once a weapon of chaos, could be their gift or their curse. It was during one of these walks through GRA Phase 2 that they noticed a small crowd gathered near a hotel. Curiosity tugged at them, but they remembered the lessons of the past months. No more jumping in. No more pretending. They watched quietly from a distance as a couple argued over a wedding contract. No phones, no cameras. Just ordinary people with ordinary problems. Rosemary and Winifred shared a glance. Maybe this was their new mission. Not to destroy, not to expose, but to quietly guide, to offer advice, to prevent disasters without being seen. The sisters laughed softly. A gentle, unselfish laugh that was nothing like the wild cackles that had filled the halls of St. Dominic, the luxury hotels, or the presidential halls. This was a laugh that belonged to people who had survived their own chaos and were determined to change. But even as they walked away, they both felt a shiver of anticipation. Port Harcourt was a city full of weddings, full of secrets, full of lives that could spiral in an instant. And the River State wreckers, once feared, now cautious, knew that their story was far from over. The city had tested them, almost broken them, and yet here they were, stronger, wiser, and more aware of the consequences of every action. For the first time, Rosemary and Winifred were not running from chaos. They were running towards it, with the hope that this time they could guide it rather than destroy it. As the sun set over the Bonny River, painting the sky orange and pink, the sisters disappeared into the streets of Port Harcourt. Nobody watched them. Nobody followed. But everyone remembered their name. The River State wreckers, no longer just a warning of havoc, but now a story of reckoning, redemption, and the unpredictable path of life. And deep down, both sisters knew that no matter how careful they became, life had a way of testing even the most careful hearts.